Happy Hallows Eve to everyone out there where it is available. The scariest thing for me that kept the evil spirits away was how incredibly dense today's Promptober ended up being. But I think it's a little appropriate just because it is the last day that I am doing this daily shenanigans. I don't know what my practice and production scheme is going to be after tonight, but it's already 10 o'clock, so I've got 30 minutes to get this video done and posted and then do all the social media stuff. So let's get into it. Today on Promptober, for the last day of Inktober, we have Landmark. Now this one I was really scared about because it was either going to be a lot of like camera tracking or I have no idea. But we'll get to that. Creeptober. Where am I on the screen? Ghostly. So either a landmark that has ghostly attributes or a ghostly landmark. So, let's get into it. The landmark was the first thing that I wanted to get onto the scene and out of my mind. And so the first thing that came to my mind when I thought of landmark was video game reference. So I found a recreation and I plopped it into the scene. And then I moved on to the ghostly aspect. And I thought, well, what about this is ghostly? And it's a fairly old reference. So I thought, well, let's make it a ghost town, a ghost reference. Quite literally. The only drawback to that, though, is the method in which I attained the ghost aspect. You can see all the interiors, like the furniture and the pipes and stuff like that. And there's a part of me that thought that was kind of cool, but there's another part of me that was like, you know what? It's not ghost enough. Like, it's kind of cool that you can see the inside, but I don't think you see the inside in all cases. So what I did was I did a placeholder to just sort of slot into the inside and just sort of fill those out. A space filler, if you will. And so what it is, it's basically a box with the holdout attribute to it. And so what the holdout does is it makes anything behind the holdout transparent, which is the same as the sky currently. And the sky is that way because I'm going to do this in 3 parts and then mesh them all together at the end. And so I also wanted to I wanted this to be a exercise in everything that I've learned and done throughout the Promptober section. So here we have a fog volumetric that I've done in the very first Promptober. But this one has been done a little differently. It's a single node, and I don't have to monkey with it or anything. I just plop it down and set its density, and I'm done. You do have to be kind of careful with the lighting, though, because it does take on the properties of whatever sun or lamp is kind of near it, which that might actually be easier for a lot of users. So at this point, I'm just kind of adding detail. So obviously we have our 2 constants that we've had for the entire thing of Promptober. Posing them, giving them stuff to do, little emotions and such like that. But by this point, when I'm adding in the candy, this is where I start to notice that the project is starting to get kind of heavy. And I'm getting a little worried because I'm not done adding stuff by a long shot. So, that's the same pumpkin also from Navigator Trick or Treat Promptober. And then I did the same candy thing that I've done in Goblin, and I forget what the other one was, but the candy that I did at the very beginning with the wrappers and the licorice, those 2 were very different. And so I add in the sky element, and it's at this point that I'm kind of thinking, all right, how am I going to do this? And so you see I've made 2 scenes now. So one scene hosts the city and our troublemakers and the volumetrics, and then scene 2 hosts the background. And so here I start to do the technique that I'm planning to do and just sort of mesh those 2 together. So the the skybox is a different layer than the city and everything populating it. And then this is kind of my final little hurrah at the very end. And I kind of had to learn on the fly because certain scene layers that I put over there on the left were disappearing, and I didn't know why. So I kept rendering. And by this time, each time I rendered, it would take longer just because there's more stuff in the scene, even though I have split it up between scenes. But what I learned as a result of that messing around was that if you do this whole render in the compositor on scene 2, and then you move over to scene 1, and you go back into the compositor, it's going to be the same way that you left the compositor since you left scene 1 to go to scene 2, if that makes sense. So let's say you set up scene 1 with A and B, and then you move over to scene 2 with A and C, right? You go back over to scene 1, it's not going to have A and C, it's going to still have A and B. So you got to add C. And yeah, I have one little spirit there that's just kind of not really shown because he's being occluded by the tower there. So I go back and I move them. And this has been my submission for Promptober. Thank you for coming along.